Hi class, today is lesson 11-7. It's on multiplying integers. Our purpose, simply stated, as in the past two lessons, is to multiply integers. No vocabulary for today. And as we look at the first example, we see that we have four different multiplication problems. Directions tell us to find each product. What I want to do first, before we find each product, is tell you what we need to think about as we're finding the product. For example, for 4 times 3, well, we know it's 12, but what does it mean? It means we are multiplying 4 times 3, or we are finding 4 groups of 3. 4 groups of 3 would look like this: 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. That's what 4 groups of 3 would be. That equals 12, of course. Now we look at this. This is the first time we have a negative factor involved in multiplication. 2 times a negative 4 means 2 groups of negative 4. That means we have a negative 4 here, plus a negative 4 here, which gives us essentially a negative 8. 2 groups of negative 4. Now this is where it gets not complicated, but you have to understand that this negative sign in front of this first factor means opposite. In other words, the opposite of 5 groups of 2. The opposite of 5 groups of 2. In other words, we have 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. There are our 5 groups of 2, and we're taking the opposite of that. Well, what does that mean? Well, once we get all these groups of 2 added together, which equals 10, of course, we're taking the opposite of 10. And the opposite of 10 is a negative 10. The opposite of 5 groups of 2, negative 10. Here we have our last problem is the opposite of 3 groups of negative 4. So a negative 3 times a negative 4 means you're taking the opposite of 3 groups of negative 4. Well, let's make 3 groups of negative 4 first. We have negative 4 plus negative 4 plus negative 4. Now, not only is it 3 groups of negative 4, but we have to take the opposite. And that negative here means the opposite. So we add all those together and we get negative 12, of course. But we now have to take the opposite of negative 12. And the opposite of negative 12 is 12. So those are 3 examples. On the next screen, you'll see the shortcuts that will help you determine what is positive and what is negative in terms of products. I want you to copy this down. Multiplying integers. 3 things. If the signs are the same, the product is positive. Here we have 2 positives, 4 times 3. 4 times 3 is a positive 12. Both these numbers are positive, factors are positive. We have a positive answer. Here we have 2 negatives. When we multiply 2 negatives together, they actually equal a positive number. Let's go back to this example here. Same thing. Here we had the opposite of 3 groups of negative 4, and as we went through this, we found that the answer indeed was a positive number, result of 2 negative factors. Second thing, if the signs are different, the product is negative. So here we have a factor that's negative times a factor that's positive. Here we have a factor that's positive times a factor that's negative. It equals a negative number. Shown to us through those examples here in the middle, B and C. Positive and a negative results in a negative. A negative and a positive results in a negative. Finally, the product of any number and 0 is of course 0, which is neither positive nor is it negative. So here are two problems that I want you to go ahead and solve. I have -7 times 5, which means the opposite of 7 groups of 5. So 7 groups of 5 means essentially 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5. Boy, my handwriting really terrible, isn't it? And then we have to take the opposite of that. Now, if you remember the shortcuts, you'll be able to do this without this step, but this is just to show you where that comes from. When you finish this problem and you go on to the next problem, don't worry about showing the steps here. Just recall those notes that you took regarding the shortcuts. What happens when you multiply a negative times a negative? What happens when you multiply a negative times a positive? We'll see you in class.